Hey there, and welcome to our embroidered leaf art workshop. The first thing I'm going to do is go over some supplies so you know what you're using. You're going to need a piece of white cardstock and two different pieces of colored cardstock. I've already cut mine out for the video. So this one here, you're going to cut down to an 8x10 so that it fits into a standard size frame, or you can cut it to an 11x14 if you have a bigger piece of paper. It's entirely up to you. 10x10s, 12x12s, those are typical standards. Just make sure that you can get it into something that is actually standard, otherwise you're going to have to custom frame and it's going to be a little more expensive. So 8x10. This one here is a 5x6 with corners rounded, and this one here is just a circle. I just used a little tiny embroidery hoop and made a circle. If you have a punch, you can do that as well. It's about a 3-inch circle. And then you're going to need some glue. You're going to need a paper trimmer, of course, to go through your actual cutting. You're going to need an embroidery needle, and you're going to need some embroidery floss as well. And most importantly, your leaf. This here is a magnolia leaf. I love these because they are super, super thick. When they dry out, they have this like really cool leathery texture. They are a little brittle when they get too dry, but you can actually flatten them out pretty well when they're still, you know, pretty new to falling off the tree. This one here has been off a little bit longer, so you kind of want to be aware of that. Make sure that you're picking up, you know, a little bit wetter ones that are still, you know, not completely dry, that are going to break. So that's what we're going to need, and I'm going to go ahead and just get started. Alright, so the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to kind of glue these into place. So I kind of want it to look like this when I'm done. That's why I cut out the shapes that I did. So again, this one here is a 5x6 with the corners rounded off of it. I'm going to put it about an inch away from these two corners here. And then this one here is about a 3-inch circle. It's going to go underneath both of these just to fill in this extra space that's over here, okay? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to glue this down. And this is just an all-purpose glue. You can also use a tape runner or a paper glue. Just make sure that whatever you're using is not terribly wet or runny, because then it will make your paper distorted and everything, and you don't want that. You want them to lay as flat as possible. So let me just glue this guy down. And again, I'm going to go about an inch from the left side and an inch from the top. So I'm not actually measuring. I kind of just eyeball everything. If you want to actually measure it just to make sure that it's where you want it, go ahead and measure so that you get it into a perfect little square, okay? And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to kind of put this guy, I want it to be underneath the leaf, so I don't want it to stick out, and I want it to be under here, so that's about where I want it. And it depends on your leaf. You can also change the layout a little bit. If it's you know, a smaller leaf or a bigger leaf, you could do it a 5x7, 4x6. It just depends on, you know, what you're actually working with, because obviously we're all not going to have the exact same leaf. Okay, so now that that's down, all right, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a tiny bit of glue on the back of the stem here, just so it kind of holds it in place a little tiny bit better, just a little bit, right on the stem. And then I'm just going to put it back in place and kind of hold on to it for a few minutes until it dries a little bit. Alrighty, so now that everything is glued down and secure, I'm going to go ahead and use my paper piercer. This I got at the dollar store, so it's pretty inexpensive. It's just got a really fine needle point on the top to make holes. You could also use your needle if your needle is sharp enough. Mine is a rounded tip, so they're not very sharp, so I'm going to use this. And I'm going to go ahead and just start creating my pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run a line down here and then kind of swerve it around to the edge here. If you want, you can also draw it on. So like you can kind of do a real quick, you know, it's about 3/4 to an inch away from the side. You can just run it kind of down like this, and I'm going to do a couple of them. So like this. And then what's going to happen once I get down to my leaf, I'm going to hook them around sideways. So if you want, you can draw your lines. It'll make it a little easier for you. If you don't need the lines, you don't have to draw them. It's entirely up to you. And I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to poke holes. And they're about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch a piece, you know, apart from each other. This way I don't have to try to poke them through with my needle as I'm going. I kind of already know where I'm going. Makes it a little bit easier. And I want all 3 of these lines to be very similar, so I'm poking the lines straight across from where the other ones are. I don't want them to be, you know, too far apart from the other ones. If you want, what you could do is you could stagger them, like there would be a hole here on this one and a hole down here on this one. You could do that as well. It's entirely up to you what kind of pattern you want to make. Me, I want each one of these lines to look exactly the same, so that's why I'm poking them in the same exact spots on each line. Okay, and then I'm just kind of gonna do my line here, just so I have a good idea of where I'm going. And like I said, these leaves are actually really great because you can draw on them, you can paint on them, you can do all kinds of other cool things to them. So my pencil's actually working pretty well. It's making little sketch marks. If for some reason yours doesn't, you know, maybe your leaf is a little too wet still. So keep that in mind. And I'm just going to keep going with my other 2 lines. Again, I want to keep them the exact same, so I'm punching holes right next to where the other ones already are. Alright, so now I have my little line. Hopefully you guys can actually see that. There's little holes right here, all the way down around where my pattern's going to go. So now I'm just going to thread everything. And I want to keep my palette pretty mellow and calm and natural. So the 3 colors that I have right here are these. And I'm actually going to use this pink, I think, because I want it to be, like I said, I don't want it to be too poppy, and I think that this one's going to be a little tiny bit too much, so I'm probably going to wind up using both of these for my overall scheme. Okay, so I'm going to take my thread that I've already used, get my needle here, alright, and then thread it through, and down at the bottom you're just going to wrap it around your finger and then roll it down to the edge. That's actually how you form your knot. Okay. Alright, and then you're going to go to the back of your design and you're going to poke it through one of these holes. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go down through the next one. And then I'm going to come back up into the next hole. And I'm going to go backwards into the hole behind it. That way it creates a solid line. If you want to go ahead and skip one, so you have a stitch, a skip, a stitch, a skip, skip, stitch, skip, stitch. Sorry about that. You can do that as well. It's entirely up to you what kind of pattern you want to do. I want to do full line, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on doing that. Okay, so when you get down here and you start going through your leaf, you just want to make sure that you're holding your leaf pretty close to the paper when you're going through. That way you're actually going through all of your layers, because even though you've poked holes in here, sometimes your leaf may move or it may be too far up and you only poke through the paper, and then you poke an extra hole in your leaf, and you don't want a ton of holes in your leaf where you don't want them. So just make sure you hold it really close and then you poke through all of your layers, okay? You don't want extra holes in your leaf, because then it's going to look like there's a bunch of random holes in there, okay? And you want it to look really nice and beautiful and the way it's supposed to, not with a bunch of space. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on going. Okie dokie, so I'm actually at the end of this particular piece of embroidery floss, so I'm going to have to tie it off and get a new piece and start. So if you're tying anything off, what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle and go back through the last stitch underneath of it, and then you should have a loop. One side is going to go stretchy, the other side is going to stay still when you pull on it. It will not move at all. So you want to get that piece that's actually attached and not moving, and you're going to wrap 3 times around it. And then you're going to just pull nice and tight so that you make your knot in the back of there, okay? Make sure that you don't pull really, really hard, because if you do that, you will actually pull the thread through all your paper and your leaf, and you will tear everything out, and you don't want to do that, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and restring everything and then go ahead and keep going on my pattern. if you want to keep your design super simple, this would be a great place to leave it. If you want to go ahead and continue like I'm going to do, I'm actually going to put a tiny little bit of like a twig here and then possibly one here as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and sketch this one in because I know for a fact I want it here. Like I said, it's just going to be very small. Now I'm going to take my gold and I'm going to go ahead and stitch basically just like I did on this one here, but as my stem. And the first thing that I'm going to do is, now that I have my thread ready, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to poke those holes down the pattern. Alrighty, so now that I have my pattern, I'm going to go ahead and just get started filling it in, like I said, just like this one. Okay, so now that I got that cute little twig right here, I'm actually going to put some flowers on the front of it, on these little stems here. But I think first what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and I'm going to create another one just so that it's a little bit more proportionate. I kind of want one that kind of is going to go off in the background back here, and I don't want to make him very big again. Just going to go little tiny bits. Just a little tiny one there, and I'm going to go ahead and sew it just like I sewed this one here. Okay, so now that we're all finished up with our two little twigs here, you can stop at this point if you want to keep it really simple, or you can go ahead and continue with me. I'm going to do little tiny flowers of French knots right here on the end of all these little stems just to give it an extra little punch of color here. Like I said, if you don't want to go ahead and continue and want to keep it like this, be my guest. I'm going to go ahead and just get started. Okay, so now that I have all my holes done, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my French knots. So what we're going to do is I have a knot at the end. I'm going to go ahead and put it through one of my flower holes. And to create a French knot, what you're going to do is you're going to hold this and you're going to wrap it around twice. 1, 2, okay? And then you're going to put it right back into the same hole that you came out of. And the secret to this is holding this side of the string a little bit taut so that everything doesn't unravel. And then you want to pull this through pretty slowly so you make sure that everything stays kind of bunched down here. You don't want it to loosen up, otherwise your knot's going to be way down in your string where you don't want it. And then you just kind of pull until it clamps onto the other side there. And that's a cute little French knot, which is going to be my little berry or flower or whatever you want to go ahead and call it. So I'm going to go into the next hole here. And I'm just going to do one more real quick. 2. Right back into the hole. And pull it through. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep going and get all of those little French knots done. there we go. Our beautiful piece of artwork is completely finished. From here you can be done. You can put it into a frame now if you would like, depending on the size that you made. You could use it on a card, a scrapbook, a junk journal. It just depends on what size you made it and what you made it for. I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. This is where I want to be done, but if you wanted, you could add more, you know, embroidery up here, a couple more of these little guys. You could just do some random shapes or something else in here. You could even go through and sketch the outline of everything. It's entirely up to you where you go from here and how you finish it, but I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and we'll see you back here for another one.